Are climate change and dirty atmospheres real or a hoax? Warm winters, more rain, less snow, icebergs melting. Could this just be a coincidence? As we put emissions and carbons into the air while pipelining oil from Canada, we may be disrupting the universe. Can we police ourselves, or do we need the scientists, activists, and the EPA? In the future, clean water and air may be for sale. On CounterPoint with Gerard McClendon. Are climate change and dirty atmospheres real, or are they hoaxes? Will air and water be for sale someday? Post your comments on Facebook and Twitter at GerardMC. Joining me today, Kathy Martin and Natalie Johnson from Save the Dunes, and Nick Jansen from Indiana Public Broadcasting. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you all being here. Of course, I was being a little silly before the show, but this is a very serious topic when we talk about the EPA budget cuts, when we talk about climate change, when we talk about contaminating water and trashing the dunes, which I'll get to in a minute. And when we talk about the production of and the salvation of energy, sometimes we abuse it. And so I want to open the conversation up today by asking the three of you, why should I care about the environment if it doesn't directly affect me or my immediate family? Does anyone from Save the Dunes want to start us off there? I know I'm being a little facetious and I have my own bent and angle on this, but why should I care about the environment or the dunes?
You know, I'm going to start off by giving an example of the Grand Calumet River that flows through Gary, Hammond, and East Chicago. Mm-hmm. Residents living right next to that river could tell you a really interesting story about a time when they dared each other to touch the water. You know, it was scary. It was scary to do so. Yeah. Fish couldn't survive there. Yeah. If you fell in it, you might have to seek medical attention. And it was, not an uncommon occurrence for it to catch fire. Mm-hmm. So could you imagine having to go back to those days, you and your family living in a community, living in an area where there's unsafe conditions for the environment, but then also your public health? So the proposed things that we're talking about today, the proposed cuts, are really potentially taking us back to a time when we weren't thinking about the environment, the long-term consequences.
The Grand Calumet River. Wow, there was a time when you could light a match and the river would catch on. I'll never forget this. When I played Little League Baseball, we used to say, walking by the Grand Calumet River, we used to say, hey man, don't stick your foot in there. You may lose it. And there's some seriousness to that. You know, I remember being near the Calumet River, and the smell was horrendous. I mean, it would practically burn your nose. And so I'm seeing already that there is a direct effect. But Kathy, I want you to take the conversation further where Natalie started us off well. Why should an individual who doesn't live near the Grand Calumet care? Why should they care?
Sure. So the environment is part of our lives, whether we acknowledge it or not. Everyone needs clean air and clean water. And whether or not you're someone that gets out and recreates, whether you want to be hiking and biking, a lot of people don't. But if you do, that's a big quality of life enhancement as well. So whether we're just talking about keeping your family safe and healthy, or we're talking about having a wonderful experience in the outdoors, it impacts all of us across the spectrum.
QOL keeps coming up, this quality of life term. It's come up on the last 3 or 4 shows that I've had, regardless of what you talk about. And so Nick Jansen, talk to me, man. Indiana Public Broadcasting, you write about environmental issues, and what seems to be some of the issues that keep popping up into your screens on your computer?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that's been popping up most lately has sort of been reactions to things we're seeing out of Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. You know, President Trump proposed a budget that drastically cuts the Environmental Protection Agency funding for the EPA. He's rolling back some climate initiatives that President Obama initiated. So right now, a lot of the things we're looking at is sort of seeing how Indiana and Hoosiers are dealing with those changes.
So let's talk about those changes that Nick just mentioned. A 31% cut to the Environmental Protection Agency's budget for fiscal year 2018. There's a possibility there. Would eliminate at least 50 individual programs and nearly 4,000 full-time equivalents in fiscal 2018. How could this be detrimental to saving the dunes?
I think we can start off by talking about one of those programs, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which in the past we had $300 million in the budget, and now that is proposed to be completely zeroed out. Funding like that has been used to do some amazing projects at the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, to do wildlife restoration. The Great Marsh is now this fantastic migratory bird stopover due to using those funds and restoring it. But then additionally, into restoring this natural habitat, you're creating a new place for people to go. The multiplier effect then of people paying money to come out here, to rent the bikes, to get the gear at the local stores to watch the birds. We see that. It's all impacted. So I'm picking on Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. That's one of many different programs that really fund a lot of what we know as the restoration that's going to tie to ecotourism in our region.
So the reason why people would come to a site or to visit a site or get off the expressway to see how beautiful the dunes are in Northwest Indiana, you have to clean it up, make it look beautiful, make sure that you've got wildlife restoration, and then you have a greater propensity for people to come visit it. So let's talk about wildlife restoration. People have talked about this for years. You hear the statements, why should the whales be saved, and who needs a spotted owl, and why are polar bears important, and why is one particular butterfly have to be saved? Talk to me, Kathy. I work a job in an urban area, not interested in butterflies, not interested in the bees, okay, or the cranes or the egrets, all right? So, okay, once again, I need a practical reason. Why should I care? Save the dunes.
Absolutely. So the Indiana Dunes specifically are a really unique place. So I can talk about how much I care that we are in this sort of weird microclimate where we have habitats unlike anywhere else in the world, and they are rare and disappearing, and so as we lose them, we sometimes are losing habitats from the planet. So that speaks to me, but I fully understand that not everyone is really going to connect with that. It might not be something that they come out to see. They might not care that we have something called a pan, which is this wetland that is not found anywhere else. That might not really be that important to them. But something that we've taken a lot of time talking about is a sense of pride and ownership and how that can be important. So I live in Gary, as does Natalie, and in Gary is a place called Miller Woods, and it is one of the most high-quality natural habitats in our region and arguably in the Midwest. And a lot of people want to really not associate that sort of beauty with Gary, but Gary is home to just rarity and gorgeous gems, and so that's what it's a point of pride for us.
Yeah, point of pride. And it seems as if, Nick, that gets lost in the narrative many times because of gun violence, because of steel mills having lower production, because of white flight, because of Northwest Indiana not necessarily being the economic giant that it once was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And so how can that be restored? And I want to look at this in terms of your journalism. What do you believe your responsibility is when it comes to the environment and being a journalist of that particular topic?
Well, I think my responsibility as a journalist is just to, tell people stories and tell people facts. You sort of asked about why do people why should they care about the environment if they live in a city? And there's not a city on the planet that isn't affected by the environment. I'm from New Orleans originally, and we need wetlands surrounding New Orleans to provide a buffer from storm surge. And when we don't protect those environments, cities are impacted. And it's the same in Indiana. You could say the same about the Indiana dunes and the lakeshore providing a buffer from coastal erosion. The Great Lakes also, in addition to wildlife restoration, the Great Lakes supply drinking water for 30 million Americans. It's a $7 billion fishery. So, these are serious programs that the federal government spends money on. And, it's not my job to say whether or not we should fund these or not, but when you cut programs that drastically, there are impacts. And I think that's my responsibility as a journalist, to just point those things out to the public.
I didn't know that. So the Great Lakes provide fresh drinking water for 30 million Americans.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you want to protect that? I'm seeing the connection now, too, as I run short on time in this first segment. I had a question here that says, can prolonged animal species survival benefit me, Gerard McClendon? But if the water is contaminated, or if we don't have fresh water, we lose out on the diversity of animal species and plant life, fauna, flora, which directly affects my quality of life. And after the break, I want you guys to think about this. Sometimes when you watch A Walking Dead, or when you watch a horror film, or when you watch a film like Get Out, it's so easy to dismiss a horror film or a thriller as, oh, that's some silly film, that would never happen. But what those films really depict is how cruel human beings can be to each other. And so I want to look at 3 examples that directly pertain to the environment. In East Chicago, a housing project was built on a Superfund site, and it wasn't cleaned up adequately. That's problematic, and people shouldn't just be fined for that. They should go to jail. Flint, Michigan still has contaminated water. This is a human crime. That's worse than a horror movie. And then the third example I want to look at is the president wanting to boost coal mining. Drill, baby, drill, for more oil. When we have progressive companies like Tesla, when we've got wind and solar companies that could probably eradicate some of the dirty fuels that we use on a day-to-day basis. So put your thinking caps on. We're going to come back and talk about some alternative ways of fueling the United States. And I want to ask you this: are climate change and dirty atmospheres real, or are they a hoax? Will air and water be for sale one day? Wouldn't that be terrible? Should we support the EPA? More Counterpoint back in a moment. Tweet me, post on Instagram, or send me a message on Facebook. Let's start the conversation. Your voice is important on Counterpoint. Welcome back to Counterpoint. Are climate change and dirty atmospheres real, or are they hoaxes? Kathy Martin, Natalie Johnson, and Nick Jansen join me as we fuel the conversation with clean fuel, hopefully, here. Let's talk about the 3 things that I mentioned in the last segment. I had a wonderful conversation with Diarmuid O'Connell. He is the vice president of Tesla. All right, he's like second in command to Elon Musk. All right. And what Diarmuid O'Connell told me was, he said, we have to find ways to fuel what we need without depleting the earth. Pretty simple mission and vision, right? We have to be able to capture what's free, sunlight, and turn it into reusable, renewable energy for human beings. Does that not make sense, or am I missing something? You guys help me out.
It makes a lot of sense.
Does it really?
And I think right now the problem is that we're not seeing more technology using alternative fuel sources. Is in the end, or at least right now, fuel is cheap. And so it's going to take a moment for renewable energy to really gain traction globally. I was listening to something this morning, and I think they said by 2040, we should see 15% of the Earth using renewable resource energy. So we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some catching up, and it's going to take incentives for people to be able to do that. And you know what? Now that's something EPA offers and other agencies, incentives for these growing green programs, alternative fuel sources, to be able to start up and get the product out there to the people at an affordable rate.
Is there anything we can learn from the animal and plant world that we're not incorporating into the human world? I think about this all the time. When you see an insect and it's like, wow, why does that insect have that many wings? Or you look at a dragonfly and how it can hover, and you see a hummingbird, it's like, this is, is there anything, especially the two of you from the dunes, every species in the world is practically there. It's almost Galapagos, all right? All right. So is there anything we can learn from animal and plant life on just being more efficient?
I think absolutely that there is a lot we can learn from animal plant life, and a lot of the concerns we are facing with these cuts is we're losing a lot of funding going to research and things like that, where we need those programs to look into what are these different alternatives, how do different species do things, and without this funding going to science and technology and research, we can lose out on these solutions that could be wins for everyone.
And may I add that we're human animals? That's the other thing, is that we can't necessarily separate ourselves from the environment. We're part of it as well. And so all of these interactions, these impacts, they're all connected.
Yeah, and we're a huge part of destroying a lot of this stuff, aren't we?
We are, but we also can do a lot of good too. And it's that forethought, thinking ahead, and using, agencies like we've brought up EPA, but I also want to call out to NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Agencies like that and departments like NOAA, they are out there, again, bringing sound science so that we can better manage lands and better manage our actions in order to improve the environment.
Improvement of the environment. Nick, you're a journalist. Is climate change real, man? Is it real? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, there's no real debate over whether or not climate change is real. And I think we've sort of seen that progress play out over the past couple decades. The conversation has shifted from whether or not people accept climate change to what are we going to do about it. So, and it's something both sides of the aisle largely agree on. Democrats have long been concerned with the issue. There's a lot of serious Republican legislators who are interested in, market forces and incentivizing clean energy through things like a carbon tax. There has been a little hitch in that evolution lately. President Trump has called climate change a hoax. The new EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, you can't really nail down on whether or not he accepts humans' role in climate change.
Right.
But the scientific community, and I think largely the political community, is at a place now where we do accept climate change, and it's more a question of how do we adapt to it than debating its existence.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, because everything has to go through legislators, which can be a beautiful thing or horrific simultaneously. Because when they start looking at things from a partisan value position, that muddies up the water, no pun intended. That muddies everything up, because I have to go with my party as opposed to with common sense. That's where it gets frustrating. So I look at a chart here that says global temperatures over time, and I'm looking at 1880 to 1920, and I'm looking at the temperatures the average temperatures being 57 down to 56.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I see an increase from 1940. Wow, enter the automobile and the bus and the plane. And those numbers start to go up from 1940, and there's a drastic increase from 1980 to now. And so I get a little emotional about this because I know that human beings we practically can do anything outside of what the Creator has already done. We can do anything, but it becomes a matter of political will. And if the political will isn't there, and if you don't have activists out there and great journalists and Save the Dunes people out there saying, this is what's really happening, putting pressure on legislators, the ball goes nowhere, you know. And so if someone is watching this show right now saying, I'd like to contribute to Save the Dunes, I'd like to help save a certain species or an animal that is endangered, but they still have to give me a little bit better reason. Talk to me, Natalie. What's my reason for calling up Save the Dunes today and saying, hey, I want to contribute $100. Where's my $100 going? Is it going to programming? Is it going to staff? Or is it actually going to save me, my family, and plant and animal life?
Well, I'm proud to say that Save the Dunes just recently, we looked at what we have coming into our organization and what's going out, and found that for every dollar that goes to our nonprofit, we're able to generate $6 back into the dune area system protection. So talk about on the ground. We're able to lift other organizations up and help get good projects going. So it's not just a lot of on-the-shelf plans.
So what might be a good project? You can give me one example, one or two examples.
Kathy here has actually been working on a project, and we talked about climate change. We are working with the Field Museum in Chicago to look at how do we manage these lands that people like to visit in Northwest Indiana, in the face of climate change. Are we managing to keep the species and to keep these areas preserved and protected? Are we going to be able to keep the dunes the way they look today and the way that they should be 20 years from now if climate change continues? So we're able to go do that work, and then this is not just going to be a standalone plan. This is something that Save the Dunes then will be taking with the land managers and putting to use. Let's actually then manage appropriately and make sure, again, these resources are here for all the threats that may be coming in the future.
Yeah.
Now, how does that resonate, though, with somebody else that's out there, again, going, well, what does my dollar do?
Right, what is it
doing?
Well,
here's the thing. We pride ourselves in our organization that we have a lot of knowledgeable people on staff. We're actually a very small staff, but mighty. Small but mighty. We do the work so that you don't have to. We meet with all the researchers, we meet with those land managers, we convene these groups, and we can be your voice. And we also want to help you understand, too. It doesn't have to be just us being your voice. We want to do this together. But if you're not comfortable talking to your legislators, or if you don't know the first thing about environmental management, or maybe you're uncomfortable with, well, I'm not sure about climate change, I know this is bad, but I need to raise my voice. We can do that.
I'm loving this. So it's like you watch Lakeshore Public TV, you happen upon watching the show CounterPoint. I've got 3 amazing guests in front of me. You give people the information. They read Nick's articles, which I'm looking at right here. Nick, House Committee advances net metering bill. Indiana Coal advocates cheer Trump climate order. Great Lakes funding slashed under Trump budget. And this is the one I love, and I want to ask you a question about this. House Committee hears 6 hours of testimony on solar bill. This is interesting to me. A bill that would change net metering from solar energy production got its first hearing before a House committee last week. The House Utilities Committee worked through lunch to hear 6 hours of testimony from 60 individuals on the Senate Bill 309. More details about this. Why 6 hours? Why 60 individuals, man?
Yeah, it's caused a tremendous amount of controversy. In fact, the House might be making its final vote on it right now as we speak. The bill basically phases out a certain rate for folks to get who sell excess energy back to the grid. They would pay them a lower rate instead. So folks with solar panels on their roofs are pretty worked up about it.
Yeah, so if you have Tesla doesn't only make cars, they make this thing called the power wall.
Yeah.
And you can buy the power wall, you can get solar panels installed on your roof,
Yep.
and then the power wall can power your home, your appliances only, or your entire home, and then you can sell that energy back to your energy company.
Yeah, you can use it all up, you can sell it back, you can do whatever you want with it. It'd be a whole self-contained little circuit there.
Has there been anyone that has tried to, kind of put you away and say, hey, Nick, don't say that? Or are you the diehard journalist that says, look, I'm just printing facts?
Well, I would say I'm the journalist who's just printing facts, but I don't know if our listenership is high enough for anyone to try to put me away.
Oh, it matters. It matters, though, because we've seen the power of a Twitter feed, haven't we, over these years? And, I think we're also witnessing the power of the environment and the power of journalism. It's a brand new day in the United States and around the world. And those who feel that they need to be an activist for the environment and those that need to be journalists and tell the truth have to continue to do so. I appreciate the three of you being on Counterpoint. This has been fantastic. Nick Jansen and Kathy Martin, Natalie Johnson. Thanks to my guests. We need to take the environment much more seriously. And I want to say this to you right now. I'm speaking from the heart. I have always been an advocate for a better way. A better way meaning what? A better way meaning that if we have to use natural gas, let's do that. If we have to get rid of coal, we have to do that. If there's a time and place to clean up lakes and rivers and the ocean, we've got to do that as well, because wind, solar, power, those things can probably get us through the needs that we have. Hey, I want to say, keep your head up. I want you to always be encouraged to view your counterpoint and speak the truth at all costs. I'm Gerard McClendon for Counterpoint. Have a great week.